Welcome to the Perfect Your Purpose podcast, where my main goal is to connect with inspiring individuals across the country, allow them to share their journeys that have brought them to where they are today, and how they're living and discovering their unique purpose day in and day out. I'm your host, Danica Tramburg. Today, I'm so happy to welcome Tim Tialdo on my podcast. I had been on his podcast previously, Life After the Crown. So honored to have been a guest on yours. TV personality, author, former podcast host himself, officiating weddings, and so much more. So just thank you for being on today.
Well, hey, it's my pleasure. And thanks again for coming on my podcast. And I'm glad we can turn the tables here and I can be your interviewee.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably the last time we spoke might have been that podcast, which seems like forever ago. But Now it's no longer. Tell me why you made that decision.
It was a long, drawn-out decision, and I tried to kind of let people in on the decision-making process in the final podcast that I did, but it came down to a couple of things, and it wasn't just one. But the first one was we were having more kids, and that free time every week, which was about 5 hours I spent every week doing a podcast. Everything from finding people like yourself, researching you, doing the actual interview, and then taking a couple hours to edit it and actually post it. It was just, I had that time, and that time started to evaporate when we had our second child. And now we have a third on the way. So it just continues to evaporate. But, I would say around that 100th podcast, which was Sophie Rovenstein, I just started to internally feel like, when you kind of feel like a chapter is closing in your life, I kind of felt like that. And I was like, okay, this is weird because I'm enjoying it. I like doing this. I really, enjoy sitting down with people like you and just having a good conversation. And it helps the pageant industry. And I think a lot of girls get a lot out of it. But there was just something that was bothering me. And so I remember right after that one, I did an interview with Taylor Kessler, who was from Texas. And then I said, I'm going to take a break for the summer. And I'm really going to think about this because I'm just not positive. I'm not sure where I'm feeling on this. And I want to take a good amount of time to pray about it and think about it. And I just kept hearing it's time to close this thing down. And, look, I wanted to continue, I promise you. But, if there's anything I've learned in my life, it's to listen to that voice sometimes, even when you don't understand it. And, things have done very, very well since that time. But yeah, I hated to end it. I really did. But it came down to, whether you want to call it a sixth sense or a voice from God or whatever. And then also, the time with not being able to do it because of my children, which they are obviously my priority. So all in all, I stand behind the decision. I'm glad I did it. I hate that I can't do those things anymore, but I'm sure there will be another time come around where I can utilize those talents and continue to put out good stuff.
But so many more talents. I feel like you have like wedding officiating.
I tried to.
Tell me more about that. How did that come about? How long have you been doing that for?
Which one? The officiant?
Yeah.
Actually, so it came from the podcast. So
okay.
You were 2019?
Yep.
Okay. So Laura Little, who was Chesley Christ's replacement when she won, we were doing a podcast. I was doing, it was the weekend that she was giving up her title in High Point, North Carolina, and her sister was there too. Her and Courtney they're both they're huge monster models. They were on the Charlotte Hornet Honeybees. And so I thought it would be a great podcast to have both of them on. And so they just came down to my hotel room the morning of the pageant. We just set up right there on a table. And we were just talking about everything. And as I did with you at the end of a podcast, I kind of do that 10 get to know you things or questions, etc. And out of nowhere, she just said, my fiance, Jack, and I would love it if you would officiate our wedding. And I'm like, I'm not ordained. Like, I'm not a pastor. And she's like, well, you can get ordained. And I'm thinking, yeah, I guess I could. And so I literally, it just kind of hit me out of nowhere, just out of left field. And I went home and I thought about it. And I actually talked to the guy who married my wife and I, and he's like, yeah, you should do it. He's like, go for it. He's like, you've been groomed for this. He's like, why not? So I went online, and it is pretty easy to get ordained these days. And I went through the process. And so I actually married them back in December of this past year in Kiowa Island, South Carolina. And now tomorrow I am headed to north of Charlotte to a plantation house to marry Devin Gant, who was Miss North Carolina USA 2016. So yeah, I guess you just never know where the road takes you. I mean, you're in communications and you're in front of a camera. I mean, you just never know where things are going to pop up and how they're going to happen. But starting from a career in news all the way to where I am now. I mean, in 20 years, I would have never believed I'd be doing the things that I'm doing now. So yeah, you just got to take opportunities as they come. And if you feel like you could do them well, you take the risk and go for it. And here we are.
I don't know when I'm getting married, but I just know that
yeah, just give me a call.
Appreciate my wedding too.
I only do former title holders.
Okay,
that's the only one I gotta keep.
Well, it's so true though. Like, just crazy where life takes you sometimes. And I feel like God always has a plan and knows, what's best for us. And even when it goes back to you making the decision to stop the podcast for now, I feel like, everything serves a purpose in its time. And sometimes it was there and you did it and it was wonderful. And then, on to the next chapter of your life.
Yeah. Bloom where you're planted, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And obviously your children, I'm sure they're just adorable and amazing. And you want to be there for all of the moments that they have growing up.
Yeah, it's a pretty awesome time right now. My friends always tell me, I'm a very late father. I'm 43. So, I started when I was basically 40. And my friends would always tell me, you're going to love it. It's going to change your life. And I never really got the whole understanding of that until now. I'm witnessing it every day. And it is. I mean, everything from I'm up at 5 a.m. and my daughter says, Daddy, I lost my passy, or just little things that, it melts your heart. And you're just like, I love this. And I feel like I just love being a dad right now.
I love it. And then going back to just, kind of how this all started, being a TV personality, how did you kind of break into that industry?
So we are literally going to go back 20 years. Okay. So I graduated from the Southern Illinois University at Carbondale in 2000. And one of my professors in that school was a former executive producer of a show that you would not remember. You probably weren't even alive, called Empty Nest. This was probably in the late 80s, early 90s, but it was a popular show. It was kind of like Who's the Boss and Growing Pains. And again, I'm aging myself here massively. But regardless, he had a massive network of people in Hollywood that he knew. And so he started something called the Hollywood Studies Program. And so what they offered to me, I was a news anchor on the college station there, and I did sports as well. And they said, would you like to be in the Hollywood Studies Program? And so I was like, well, sure, I need to understand exactly what I'm going for here. And he said, well, do you want to work in Hollywood? And I said, yeah. I said, I would love, at that time, I really loved Entertainment Tonight and Access Hollywood. And I was like, that's kind of my dream goal. I think a lot of girls in the pageant industry kind of have that goal too. And so that's where I think where we relate really well. And he said, I actually know the lady in the research who runs the research department at Access Hollywood. Let me get you an interview. And he said, if you get the job, then you are part of the Hollywood Studies Program. And basically, I finished my college career in Hollywood at Access Hollywood. Those were my final credit hours. So I actually walked through graduation before I went out to Hollywood. So they basically, put it on me that, hey, you're going to go out there and you're going to finish your hours and you're going to do it. Well, that's what happened. So I got the job. 2 weeks later, my best friend jumps in the car with me. We drive to LA from St. Louis. It's like 22 hours. It was the longest road trip I've ever taken in my life. But it was really interesting to drive Route 66 all the way out there. So after that, so that was about 9 months that I stayed out there. And Rob Silverstein was the executive producer at Access Hollywood. And Nancy O'Dell was the host at the time, along with a gentleman named Pat O'Brien. And I would sit with Nancy every day in the green room while she was getting ready. And I would deliver like biscotti and coffee. I mean, I was truly like, pardon my language, but I was the bitch on the staff. I mean, I was the guy running papers at 4 a.m., delivering coffee, getting biscuits and whatever everybody needed. I mean, that was literally kind of my job before the research day began. And she taught me so much just in here about hosting and preparation and some of the things that you see me do today. But I just was sitting there thinking, I want to be here. I want to do this. Like, I want to be here. And I'm 22 at the time. So I'm a young cat in a big world. And I talked to Rob Silverstein about it. And he said, look, son, you want to do this job. He's like, I'm going to need you to go work your way up through the ranks and then come back when you're ready. And so, it was kind of I get it. Okay. Yeah. I'm the young guy. I get it. So I didn't understand what that meant exactly. And he's like, I want you to go get some jobs in news, do some reporting, do some live stuff, learn how to do some hosting, maybe some emceeing. He's like, really understand that live audience and the camera audience. And he's like, when you get an agent one day, maybe we can talk again. And now he said that might be 10, 15 years. He's like, but you got to go begin the process. And so that's back then how the process worked. It's not that way anymore with YouTube and all the things that you can do today, but that's what I did. My next job was I went from Los Angeles and I literally lived next to Warner Brothers Studios. I went to Clarksburg, West Virginia to Market 165 to WBOY The Boy TV. And I was a weekend anchor and reporter to start. And then I got promoted to the morning show and I stayed there for 2 years. Incredibly difficult, not going to lie. I mean, there is nothing that when they say coal miners and lumberjacks, I mean, that's what's going on out there. I mean, we had the FBI fingerprint center. That was like the big thing that they had there. So not a lot going on. From that job, I got a job in Springfield, Missouri. So that was about that was market 75. So it was a pretty good jump, about 90 markets. And that was one of my favorite jobs that I quite frankly ever had. I was there for, 3 years as a weekend anchor. And then I also spent 1 year and I think you've done something like this. I was an MC for the AA St. Louis Cardinals. Oh. So it was the Springfield Cardinals. Uh-huh. So, I was the Jumbotron guy, if you will. And that was quite honestly, spending 6 years in television, for that first time that you stand up with a mic, no prompter, no nothing, in front of a live audience of 10,000 people and they can stare right through you, it's intimidating. And it was really challenging at first. And I thought it was going to be easy. I'm like, I got this. I was cocky. I really was. And I thought I was going to be great at it. And it took me a little bit. I did eventually become good at it, but it humbled me greatly. But that was also my first real experience with doing what I do today with pageants, which is you give me the mic and a stage and a crowd. And that's it. I do have a script, but for the most part, I'm kind of on my own up there. And to be able to talk for 3 hours and guide and pilot a show, it takes a lot. And you have to be able to handle that audience. And so that was my first real experience with that. So after the Cardinals, then I went to St. Louis, which is my home. And I got hired on a show on the CBS affiliate called Great Day St. Louis. So it's one of those mid-morning lifestyle shows. And I was kind of known as the field host or field reporter. So I was the feature guy that would go out every morning and find some really fun story to do or really, really fun live shot or whatnot. I did that, 9 months. And then the big recession hit and they laid off our entire staff because our show was brand new. So I was out of a job. And I was very motivated at the time because this was my first real bout with hosting and I loved it. And I was like, I want to do more of this, but you can't tell me that this is the only job in America. There's got to be others. And even if there is a recession, I'm going to figure it out. Well, it turns out that some guys I went to high school with owned one of the big production companies in town called Spot Creative Media. And so I had an idea for a more evening lifestyle show, more of the nightlife, the fun stuff going on. Where do you go to restaurants? Where are the cool places to go to hang out? Where's the stuff to take your family? Not really the morning lifestyle show for the moms doing laundry. This is more like for people your age to say, what's hot? Where am I going? How am I doing it? And so I called it, we ended up calling it Spot TV. We kind of named it after them. And we created 6 episodes and ran it on the ABC affiliate in St. Louis. And that's where I actually won my first Emmys, was our own created show. This wasn't through an affiliate. We actually did this on our own and gave it to ABC to air. And so that's how those first 2 Emmys came along. And then we ran out of money, if I'm being quite honest with you. It's very expensive to do a show. So we spent a lot of money and didn't have a lot to show for it, except we had great shows. It did really well. People obviously thought it was good, but at the end of the day, money's what talks in that industry. And so that fell apart. Well, during that time, I had gotten to know many people at the St. Louis Rams when they were still in St. Louis. And so I had called the director of public relations, and I knew that they had a host for their show called Rams Nation, and I didn't know if they were staying. And so I said, are they staying? And she's like, I don't think so. Now, I don't recommend people do this, but this is what I did. I talked to a friend of mine and I said, I want this job and I don't care what it takes to get it. What do I do? He said, offer your services for free for a year, under the guise that if I do well and you like what I do and your ratings are good, that you'll hire me back and pay me next year. That's exactly what happened. So I did 24 shows for free. Now, by law, they had to pay me like minimum wage. They couldn't actually have a free employee on the staff. But so I did that, 2 or 3 years. And then I ended up meeting my wife online. I'm in the modern day age here. That's how we met. And I moved here out to Denver and pretty much wiped away my TV career for my wife, because I kind of came out here and completely restarted. I became an entrepreneur. We own several businesses now. The pageant thing came into play about 2014 when the Miles family called me from RPM down there in the Carolinas, Alabama, Louisiana. And I've been doing that ever since. And life's good. It's not exactly where I ever thought I would be, but it's been a fun, unique, and interesting road. But I will say, out of all that, and TV and media and being on in front of people, the greatest decision I made was in 2012. My wife and I, rededicated our lives to Christ. We got rebaptized, and it became less about me at that time. And I think that changed my entire trajectory of everything that I do these days. I still get to be in front of people, but I mean, even if you look at my Instagram now, I just don't really make it about me anymore. And it's a tough, most people think are like, did he fall off the face of the earth? Is he dead? And it's like, no, I just don't want to make it about me anymore. And so I kind of just quit posting.
That's incredible.
We are.
I mean, I like, faith is such a huge part of my life, and I know it's a part of your life, and just seeing just how you exemplify that is really amazing. How do you feel, 22 years old, you're kind of chasing Hollywood? I mean, I've been there. I still kind of might be there a little bit, but that's exciting stuff. And, that's like your passion at the time. And then coming 20 years later, rededicating your life to Christ, all of that, like, where do you feel your purpose has shifted from then to now?
Vastly different. And let me say this, where I was at your age, or how old are you? And I know I'm not supposed to ask a woman how old she is, but at 22 or 24, if you will, I think the reason that I do well in the pageant world and understand many of you when I speak to you is because I literally was you, except a male. I mean, I literally had the same motivations, the same excitement, the same wants. I mean, 95% of pageant girls that I talk to, they all want to be on TV. They all want to be famous. They all want to be in the spotlight. I get it. That was me. It was. And I also realized how misguided that was. And that's not to say that I don't want any of you to go out there and try and do what God's given you gifts to do, because if that's what you're supposed to do, that's what you're supposed to do. You're not me. But I can tell you that the further I tried to travel that road, and every time I remember when I literally said this, and I, self-admittedly say I was not a great boyfriend. I literally told a girl, it's about, you either follow my career or we're done. I remember saying that. I literally do. And I hate myself that I was that guy, but I was. And so I think there came a point, and it came after when I talked about Spot TV, when we created our own stuff. I mean, I was literally like doing everything I could to push what wasn't happening in my life. I'm like, I'm going to force it to happen. I don't care what it takes, how much money it takes. I'm going to figure it out. And I think you eventually, no matter how strong or tough or egotistical or cocky you are, you hit a wall. And that's when God's saying, hey, you want to do it my way, or you want to keep trying to do it your way? And I finally gave up, and I said, you know what? You're right. And I some hard, long cries and some hard, long nights and mornings. And, we went through it. And I think the moment I gave it up, now don't get me wrong, I mean, the transition still takes some time. It's not like, boom, you baptized, bam, here I am. It doesn't happen like that. Yeah. But I mean, you know me in the pageant world. I mean, they can attest to the type of man I have become, that I look at all of you like my daughters. I think because a lot of guys are like, oh, that's a tough job. And I'm like, I get it. I understand where you're coming from, but that's not me anymore. And I think God's almost given me the gift that I only can look at you in that way. I can't see pageant girls and go, wow, she's sexy, or I just don't literally almost have that capacity at this point. Yeah. And it's a blessing, because trust me, the moment if it ever was like that, I'd be out, gone. Right. Because I have a wife who I love very much. I have my daughters who I'm setting an example for, and I'm trying to guide them in Christ. And so, it is a journey. And I'm actually working with a couple of girls right now. We literally read YouVersion app, the devotionals together. Yeah. And join me on there if you ever want to. I'd love to do one with you. and just helping girls with their journey of, I think in pageantry, the biggest one is validation. Can you attest to that?
Right. Yeah, for
We
sure.
want validation.
It's
I
true.
wanted validation. I wanted to be on TV because I wanted to prove to everybody that I can do what everybody said I couldn't do, or that I wasn't a whack job for thinking that I could be famous or what. But what I realized is I was following what the world thought I should be.
Mm-hmm.
If you go on Instagram or Facebook or Snapchat or TikTok or any of them out there, there's 50 of them out there. That's what the world is telling you right now. And I literally watch almost every girl I meet follow one of those.
Yeah.
Vanity, greed, power, sex, fame, you name it. It's what Hollywood is selling you right now. And it's like everything that's wrong with society is exactly what they're telling you is what you need to be. And it takes a very strong person, not just a man or just a woman. It takes a strong person these days to go in the face of that and say, no, I'm going to do what he wants me to do, whether you like it or not, or whether the world thinks I'm great or not. I just don't care at this point. I only care what he thinks. And, the time's coming. And I know when I step on the doorstep of my judgment day that I'm going to be able to say, I did choose you. I had a bad run there for a while, but I choose you, and that's where I'm going to stay. And so that's what motivates me literally every day at this point.
What would you say to someone who, struggling to find kind of their way in life? Maybe it's a career they're pursuing and they can't get there. And they're just, struggling to, see where they fit in.
I think my first question to anybody like that would always be why? Why are you pursuing that path? Is it because you're truly gifted at it? Mm-hmm. Is it because you want everybody to see you do it? And look, we've all done this. I promise. Yeah. I'm fully self-admitting. I wanted the world to see me do things. I did. Yeah. And I think most of the time, if you dig into the real core reason and be real honest with yourself, look yourself in the mirror and go, why am I doing this? Mm-hmm. Now, in pageantry, a lot of the girls say, well, and they don't mean this in a cocky way, but they're like, I was blessed. I'm a beautiful girl. And my type of personality tends to be on television or out in the public eye. I get that. Yeah. But just because you're beautiful doesn't mean you're blessed with communication talent. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have plenty of girls who come up to me when they want to host, and the moment they open their mouth, I'm like, we got a long way to go. We got a long way to go. So that's the first thing is I really dig into what your why is. And I mean, you got to be really honest with yourself. I mean, you can have all the motivations in the world and you can be super stubborn and prideful about it too. Mm. Because, if you follow the success books of these days and, the Anthony Robbins of the world, everybody, it's all about, just dig deep and find that way and you can do it no matter what. And so there's that mentality to basically fight against what maybe God's asking you to do, because you're dead set and your ego and your stubbornness is dead set on, I'm going to get that goal no matter what. And sometimes that's just not the best way. And I know that is 100% counterintuitive opinion right now, that most people are like, well, that's not what I usually read. I don't either. You're right. I've read all the books. I've read all the big success books. I lived that life where I almost kind of wanted to be that guy. I almost went into motivational speaking. Thank God I didn't. But, when you really start to look at your why, I mean, my why was, now it's definitely my kids and my wife. It's what example am I setting to the world? And most importantly, what is God looking at me and thinking? Mm-hmm. When the time comes, am I going to be taken or am I going to be left here? And, that's a terrifying thought if you really think about it these days.
It is.
And so, look at all those things and be honest with yourself. And that's probably the best advice I can give.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And when you were just speaking about, what the world's telling you, I definitely feel like I encounter this all the time. It's such a me society.
It is.
And it's always like, you can do it yourself. And it's like, sometimes you can't. Like, I've come into many situations in my life where I've realized that I solely myself cannot make this happen. Like, it's avid prayer and, trusting God that he has the right path for me. But, we're all taught that we do anything we want, which is sort of true. Like, I really do think if you have enough motivation and grit, like, you can do whatever it is that
I don't disagree with that. Yeah.
But if it's not intended for you, it's not going to happen. And if it is, it will make its way for you, I believe. But yeah,
well,
it was just, go ahead.
What you were saying there, I mean, I just actually read the scripture this morning. It's in the book of Timothy. In the last days, the world will be lovers of themselves. I mean, that could be Instagram's tagline, literally, like, we love ourselves. I mean, that's just what it is. I mean, it's so funny. And I know a lot of people use it for good reasons, but if you just literally just open up Instagram, it's like, everybody loves themselves. It looks pretty good. But in addition to what you said was, sometimes you want to dig deep and find that way and use the grit. I believe I have found in my life, I have enough experience with this to know that sometimes God will give you absolutely zero options. So you have to rely on him. And that's where he wants you. And what we as people want to search for is security. I want the house. I want the cars. I want the money. I want security. I want to know that I've got enough in my bank account that, I can retire early, etc. That's what we search for. He's looking for you to rely on him. And sometimes, so he's like, maybe the bank account doesn't need to be full today. And you're like, ugh. But you're in a good place, because guess what happens when you're in that spot? You get on your knees and you're like, God, help me. I need, and he's like, thank you. That's what I'm looking for, is, you to acknowledge me and the fact that you need me.
So true. Definitely in a me society, it's so important, I think, to look outside of yourself. But I'm kind of feeling a part 2 of this conversation at a later date.
Sure.
I think we'll have to do this again. And I just want to say thank you for joining me today. And can you share with everyone where they can find you on social media and follow your journey?
Yeah, I mean, you can find me, and I do check messages. I don't really go on there much, but my Instagram is @Tim Tialdo. It's very simple, TIMTIALDO. Facebook, I think it's also Tim Tialdo. And then I do have a website, timtialdo.com. So if you want to contact me, that's usually the best way. There's a contact page there. You can just email me and I can get back to you. But yeah, that's the pretty simple way to get a hold of me these days.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I hope everyone has a great day.
My pleasure. My pleasure.